Vetted actually is a company that I started in partnership with a advisory board member at the Titus Center, Steve Lieber, who him and I both shared the same common values of where we kind of see franchising going, where we see the quick service restaurant space going, and how we think it needs to be disrupted. And, it's a ripe industry for disruption. But at the same time, the franchise system participating in a rebate that increases their revenue.
You've got a franchising degree, you went to the Titus Center, you've been around industry veterans. Franchising industry, you kind of alluded to earlier, it was different 5 years ago compared to where it is today, and probably somewhere very different in another 5 years. What have you kind of seen as been like the changes over the years since you started at Palm Beach Atlantic to where we are today? All right, everyone. I hope everyone's doing amazing today. I'm no longer keeping track of episodes as we've kind of built up the episodes, but very excited for today's guest with Mitchell Nolan on the Conquer the Mind podcast. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Looking forward to a great time.
Awesome. So very briefly, I tried to change things up a little bit. So I'll do a very brief introduction of your background, Mitchell. Feel free to correct me anywhere I mess up, and then we'll kind of dive into it if that makes sense.
That'd be great.
Awesome. So Mitchell, very accomplished at a very early age. So we're going to dive into a bunch of different things. He actually is involved in 3 different businesses, all in the franchising space. He actually started off his college career graduating from Palm Beach Atlantic at the Titus Center of Franchising, where Mitchell and I actually originally met at an advisory board meeting. So very excited. We're going to dive into the Titus Center. They're doing some incredible work. So Mitchell is the president of DJM Nolan, which helps businesses kind of evaluate what those next steps of growth are. If they're a business maybe looking to franchise, it's definitely not an easy process. It's very different to take a business and take it franchising. So Mitchell's expertise helps a business start to evaluate those different options. He's also the co-founder and president of Vetted Brands, which helps people that are interested in franchising and business ownership, and they really specialize on the quick service restaurant theme. So a very hot topic in franchising. I'm very excited to dive into that as well. And without further ado, Mitchell is also part of Band, which does really, really incredible work when it comes down to the franchising industry and helping business owners with their rebates, track spending. And that's one of the big things when you have a business, you're looking into franchising. You have all these national resources programs, but where's that money going? Where's it allocated to? So Mitchell's doing some great work with Band. So that's really kind of a high level of Mitchell's career. And if you can't tell, very young entrepreneur. And really one of the goals of the podcast is not only help those people that are, 40, 50, 60 in corporate America, still trying to figure out what their why is. But for me personally, 4 or 5 years ago, I graduated from University of Florida with a fancy business degree and really had no idea what I wanted to do in life. So at this point, it's very it's very hard when you're lost in life and then finding that direction, finding that meaning. So I'm really excited, Mitchell, because you're someone very young and knows exactly what they want, have their direction. So I think we're going to have a lot of value in this episode, and I'm excited to dive into it.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, we covered a lot there in just that minute or so introduction. But yeah, those 3 things are 3 businesses that I'm really passionate about, and they all stem back to franchising. Love the franchise community, and that's kind of what I got my degrees in from the Titus Center for Franchising, and I'm so blessed and fortunate to have Dr. Hayes and the Titus Center behind me from that.
No, that's awesome. I think that's a good way to really start off the episode for people that have no idea what the Titus Center of Franchising is. Do you want to just give kind of a high level of what the Titus Center is and kind of how your experiences originally started at the Titus Center?
Yeah, definitely. So back in 2020, I went to Palm Beach Atlantic University and I set out to PBA just to play golf on the golf team there. Very avid golfer, loved playing golf, and played on the college team there, but then realized I wanted to do something, get my degree in either entrepreneurship or something in business related. Uh, and the Titus Center was right there. It was actually right below my college dorm room. So there was a big sign that said Titus Center for Franchising. I said, what is franchising? What's the Titus Center? And immediately I talked to Dr. Hayes, learned about what franchising really is and, what businesses are franchised, and fell in love with that automatically. Loved the Titus Center, loved Dr. Hayes's teaching style. And
Mm.
so that kind of formed, my love for franchising. And so from there, I later graduated and then got my MBA in franchising from the Titus Center. But a little bit of background of the Titus Center, founded in 2017, Ray
Mm.
Titus, who owns a company, a conglomerate of franchise brands called a United Franchise Group, donated an endowment to actually help start the Titus Center back in 2017. At the time, it
Mm.
was the first university to actually have franchising as a center of excellence. And
Mm.
since then, there's about 5 or 6 others that have started a center or something like the Titus Center at their university. And so that's kind of, the reason the Titus Center got started was because Ray Titus needed some more interns and some more employees from
Mm.
the surrounding areas of West Palm Beach. So he started the Titus Center for Franchising. And, because of that endowment and because of the work Dr. Hayes has put in, is the reason why, we're graduating, 30 or 40 students a year in franchising.
That's incredible, Mitchell. That's awesome. And I know just going to the advisory board meetings, it's just very inspirational. I remember I left with a very strong feeling after going to the first advisory board meeting where I met you. I think it was they were graduating some people from the previous class almost a year ago at this point, I want to say. And I remember because it was really a room full of almost 100 like high level executives in the franchising industry. And they had college students that were graduating with this franchising specialty speak to all the franchise executives. And I was just thinking back to me at that age. I would have been shaking so hard to speak in front of that many people. No idea what I wanted to do in life. And to one, just watch their confidence, but two, just at an early age, knowing exactly what direction they wanted to go to, very inspirational, very motivated. And it's just very awesome to see what Dr. John Hayes and Ray Titus are really doing to really educate people and empower that next generation. I'd be curious, Mitchell, you see like the Titus Center franchising sign, you start to see entrepreneurship. How were you surrounded by entrepreneurs in your family, or what was like that initial kickstart to business ownership, to franchising? I know anyone that talks to Dr. John Hayes is typically sold on franchising pretty quickly. So I'm curious what that story looked like.
Yeah, I know growing up, I always wanted to do something in business. There's a funny
Mm.
story that my parents sometimes tell. And, one day I'm in the car and I'm asking my mom's a nurse and my dad's a salesman in
Okay.
technology. So he sells, technology and software. And in the car, I'm asking my mom, I'm probably 10 years old. I'm asking her, what does an eye doctor do? What does an eye surgeon do? And so then at that young age, my mom was thinking, oh, maybe he's going to become an eye surgeon. And my dad later got down to asking the question, well, why become an eye surgeon? And, at 10 years old, I said, well, I want to own 5 or 10 eye clinics.
Mm.
And so, stemming from actually becoming an eye surgeon and owning, one clinic or working in a hospital, my dad was able to narrow down, well, why do you want to be an eye surgeon? And my reasoning was because I wanted to own 5 or 10 eye clinics.
Yeah.
Or, that can be accomplished through franchising with,
Mm.
a medical center or surgery center. And so that's kind of where I think the business mind kind of sparked.
Hmm. No, that's really interesting. And one of my big takeaway out of that story is just your curiosity. I feel like that's what I see out of a lot of successful entrepreneurs. Just that very curiosity, being curious about different things that are happening. I think a lot of us growing up, we want to just put our name on a shirt and start selling it and making money off that. But it's really about how are you providing value to other people. And I think that really stems from having that curiosity, learning about society, what's happening, and how you can start to have that passion or solve that problem, as some of my previous guests have alluded to. So I think that's really interesting, Mitchell. And Can you kind of dive in a little bit to like the courses at the Titus Center of franchising? Like when you're in the classroom at the Titus Center, what does that like actually look like? I know personally, I honestly didn't even show up to a lot of my college courses, these huge like 200, 300 person lecture rooms. You don't get a lot of material out of that. You'll be very lucky to maybe ask a question. Then you have like these online virtual classrooms that are more 20, 30 people, but it's really like you watch it on your own time. There's no like personal interaction. So, and that did not do me any justice. So I'm just curious, after seeing a lot of people very empowered after graduating from the Titus Center, what are they doing that's like so different, like in the classroom, that kind of got you this confidence that, you can conquer the world in franchising?
Yeah, you can't miss Dr. Hayes' classes. That's for sure. I love them. Dr. Hayes' classes usually are, anywhere from 15 to 20 people in the class. So it's a really tight amount of people, and it's really great. It's really engaging. Usually we'll have a speaker at least once a week, maybe once every other week. And that speaker's either on Zoom or it's a in-person speaker where, they come into the class and it's a franchise leader who is on the advisory board, and they dive through whatever their expertise is, whether it's franchise development, operations, etc. And so learning from that individual and being able to ask them questions and actually be able to interact with them really is amazing, because you don't get that anywhere else.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that always kind of stood out to me as well is that they do a really good job getting those real world experiences from like internships. And they're always like, when I go to the advisory board meetings, they're really promoting that very heavily, just with the college students, and really forcing them to really interact with I say forcing, but they really want to interact with franchise developers. Typically you go to these conferences, they really tell you like where to sit, like kind of assigned seating. It's not necessarily like that. It's really like the students want to engage with the developers and build those relationships. Can you talk a little bit, Mitchell, about some of those real world experiences during your experience? Were you doing internships during your years at Palm Beach Atlantic, and how did that kind of like shape your eventual college experience?
Yeah, no, exactly. So kind of looking at the Titus Center for Franchising and the degree you get. So you don't get a major in franchising, you actually get a concentration. So you usually pick, your major. In my case, I did international business, and then it's almost like a minor, but not quite a minor. It's a concentration in franchising. And so what that consists of is 4 classes. 3 classes like franchise creative ventures, franchise case studies, and introduction to franchising are kind of the 3 classes that you take with Dr. Hayes or with Dr. Christos. And then the extra internship class is a 90-hour internship that I took with Sloan's Ice Cream. That's actually based in West Palm Beach with David Wired. And that was a really awesome internship in the sense that, we really saw everything from operations to franchise development to, actually making the ice cream in the office, which is what we did. It was really cool to see, because at my time of the internship, we were actually doing a POS change. So we were vetting some other suppliers and actually integrating the POS into the restaurants and doing a test case with their Clematis location in West Palm Beach. So it was really awesome to kind of see how everything works. And over that 90-hour internship, 15, 16-week time frame, it was really awesome.
No, that's really interesting. And I love the actual like hands-on experience. And, as a franchise consultant myself, I talk to a lot of candidates that they want to get involved in business ownership, but they don't really want that hands-on experience. They want more of that executive model, and totally makes sense. You've worked hard in your career. You're not looking for that hands-on, but what you see out of a lot of like the most successful franchises is that they start off in like that hands-on, that owner operator model, really learning the ins and outs of the business. Because really one of the hardest things, in my opinion, with business ownership, and one of the biggest fears I hear, is hiring employees and labor. And, if you've never done that job before and you're trying to tell other people to do that job, it's kind of just like a credibility gap. Whereas when you've actually done that job before, the ins and outs. A lot of building that rapport is having that sympathy and knowing, what they're going through. And if you've actually gone through that, I think that's very helpful. And, me personally, managing a dry cleaning franchise in high school is very eye-opening, as you're alluding to, really learning the ins and outs of the business. And I hear you talking about, the POS system, and I'm sure that kind of eventually related to the band project that you're working on as well, and kind of helping the rebate. So I think that's very interesting, Mitchell. And one of the things I want to kind of dive into as well is you mentioned you got your MBA from the Titus Center as well. And, in entrepreneurship, it's a little bit like contradictory between like going to school and entrepreneurship. Can you talk to us a little bit what made you want to get your MBA even after, having all that experience at the Titus Center? How come you wanted to still get some more schooling, some more education? Why was that important to you?
Yeah, well, Red Boswell got an MBA from the Titus Center, so I decided I wanted to. No, so Red Boswell actually graduated when I got my undergraduate degree from the Titus Center with his MBA, and it was something that I've always considered getting my MBA, and the opportunity presented itself, and I thought, why not? So I took the next 12 months and got the MBA out of the way. Really glad I did. At the time, I was able to play golf for the golf team while completing my MBA, so I was able to add another year to that, as well as just the education I was able to learn from Dr. Hayes, and the independent studies that I took with him was really invaluable for what I would be working on with my DJM Nolan, helping companies franchise, writing training operation manuals, and evaluating opportunities.
No, that's awesome, Mitchell. And I want to dive in, with the name of the podcast being Conquer the Mind. We got to conquer the mind a little bit and kind of dive into the mindset, the perspectives. So as I kind of alluded to earlier, my college experience, I just did not make the most of it, and really made me feel very lost when I was graduating. Just no sense of direction, purpose. Didn't really take advantage of the networking opportunities, which I think is the most important in college. I'd be curious, as we want to really help those people that are entering college, they're trying to find the workforce, trying to find that purpose, that why. What is it? What was like that mindset that you had, like going into Palm Beach Atlantic, going into college? It sounds like you're taking advantage of opportunities. You see Dr. John Hayes, you see franchising. You could easily just keep walking to the bar. You don't have to go to the business center. What was like your mindset in college that allowed you at this point, early in your career, to already have massive success, have a very strong network, and have that strong sense of direction?
Well, for me, it's really, it's great graduating from a university. It's great going to university and getting a degree. But really what you're paying for are the people, the connections. So best friending your dean of the business school, best friending individuals that can help you achieve your goals is really, the best way to go about university and going to school. Learning from individuals and mentors that have done it before and are going to help you for your continued success is really important. And that was kind of my mindset going into it was, hey, yeah, I'm going to get this degree when I finish college and when I graduate. But really, what do I want to take out of, Palm Beach Atlantic University? And really, what do I want to, achieve 5 or 10 years down the road? And who can help me achieve that? And where can I find them?
No, I think that's really powerful, Mitchell. And I really just like the progression. It's just really awesome to see what they're doing at the Titus Center in Palm Beach Atlantic. And I know you even mentioned that big endowment that the Titus family was putting down. I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, they're actually getting a bigger investment right now to really redo the whole Titus Center, a whole new building. So it sounds like there's pretty strong demand. There's more people going through the Titus Center franchising. Can you talk a little bit what's happening right now at the Titus Center? What is like on the horizon? And, it really sounds like they're leading the charge. So I think it's really awesome to kind of share what's going on there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Titus family actually put up another endowment, for the new business school. And with the new business school, I think in total, they're raising about $80 million to build this new business school. It's going to be, I think, 120,000 square feet. And there's going to be a Dr. John Hayes museum in there. So it's a museum dedicated to franchising. At the Titus Center already, we already have, franchise industry specific museum pieces at the Titus Center, but we're going to have a full museum for franchising there. And so that's really cool to see, as well as a lecture hall that I think is going to be 100 or 200 people lecture hall, which is going to
Oh,
be pretty neat to see, as well as a amphitheater, I think. There's a
wow.
couple of things that are still in development with the new business school, but I know it's going to be pretty cool once it's done.
That's awesome, Mitch. I appreciate you sharing. I know I'm excited to see what that new building looks like in the years to come. So now I'd love to start to transition to some of your businesses and post Titus Center and kind of what you're working on. And honestly, a nice transition with probably vetted brands, because I know part of you getting associated with vetted brands was some of those relationships that you were building at the Titus Center. Can you talk to us a little bit about that transition after college and beginning to start your own businesses? What were those early stages like?
No, definitely. Yeah. So kind of shedding some light into how I got into, the actual franchise community. It
Hmm.
was actually during college. So I worked with a software company at the time in college called Operandi, and we were consumer financing software for home service brands looking for financing. So it was a multi-lender uh, software that would allow a franchise system or franchisee to actually help their customer get funding for either a
Hmm.
new roof, new floors, new kitchen, something like that in the home service space. And so I was working with them for about 2.5 years while I was in college at the Titus Center. Then, decided to get my MBA, and then from there started DJM Nolan, which would be working with, training manuals, training programs, operations manuals, and helping, companies franchise their business and evaluate, if they should franchise or if they shouldn't franchise, and, where should they go if they don't franchise, how should they expand. So that was kind of what DJM Nolan still does. And then Vetted Brands, Vetted actually is a company that I started in partnership with a advisory board member at the Titus Center, Steve Lieber,
Hmm.
who him and I both shared the same common values of where we kind of see franchising going, where we see the quick service restaurant space going, and how we think it needs to be disrupted. And, it's a ripe industry for disruption. So that's
Hmm.
kind of what Vetted is. And then Band came along, and Band is a group purchasing platform that allows franchise systems to aggregate purchasing power and actually help franchise systems collect rebate revenue from suppliers, help lower rates for their franchisees. So having, that group purchasing allows that franchisee to get the best
Hmm.
rate on their supplies possible, while at the same time the franchise system participating in a rebate that increases their revenue. So that's kind of what Band helps do. So
Hmm.
all three of those combined are really how I'm leveraging, the franchise space, and why I love franchising in the first place, because
Hmm.
it allows the opportunity for an individual that knows nothing about a specific business to be able to operate and own and thrive in that business.
No, that's awesome, Mitchell. You're doing a little bit of everything. I love it. It's very like inspirational and motivational to see, and it's really this is fun to have you on the podcast as well. I think your insights, your experiences are very, very valuable. Can you talk to us a little bit? We know as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, everything is not always super easy. Business ownership is not the path for everyone. As much as you and I love business ownership and it's done tremendous things for us, it's still not the path for everyone. Can you talk to us a little bit about like some of those early challenges when you're starting to launch, DJM Nolan, what were those early stages like, especially as, you graduate with an MBA? How are you, starting to really implement all the things that you learned into real life?
hmm Yeah, getting my first client for DJM Nolan was extremely tough. It took a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, before I finally signed that first client. And really, it's just being persistent and staying with your lead or your client. Ensuring that you give them everything that they need to make a decision to whether or not they're going to go with you. Is
Mm.
really key to signing your first client, and then actually implementing that client, getting that client up and running. That can be a learning process in itself. But I
Mhm.
think, you don't have a business without sales.
Yeah.
So, definitely having sales is definitely the first start, or the first metric that you're looking for. And that's kind of the hurdle that I had early.
Hmm. No, that's awesome, Mitchell. And one topic I want to dive into, because I think this is really powerful with an entrepreneur and a business owner. You kind of mentioned those first 2 months without a client, just trying to figure everything out. I know like some businesses, it even takes like 6, 24 months to kind of get that ramp up period of a business. And, once you get like that first client, that first win, you start to build some momentum and you can really start to get that exponential growth. But can you talk about those first 2 months? Before you have a client, before you have a lead, you don't really have like these wins to stack, if you will. How do you like stay positive, believing in yourself, or how do you figure out like small wins that you can stack that eventually lead to this bigger win, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for DJM Nolan, I was working on other projects, other smaller projects as well. So, stacking those smaller wins definitely helps.
Hmm.
Um, and then, once you get the big win, that's what builds some momentum. And once you have the momentum, never let it go, because that's really what's key. Uh, Finding momentum and then building upon the momentum. That's what's really great.
No, that's really interesting, Mitchell. And as you do, I know you get your MBA, you launch DJM Nolan. How do you start to figure out, you want to get involved with vetted brands and band as well? How do you like start to like analyze society, franchising, and you're like, there's a need for that business, this service? How come you don't just stick with DJM Nolan? How come you see the need in vetted brands and band, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, for vetted brands, specifically, we focus just on QSR and fast casual right now. And
Okay.
so, when Steve and I've known Steve for about 2 to 3 years. And in those 2 to 3 years, we were always talking back and forth of, how we think franchising is today, how we think it's going to be in 5, 10 years. And, he came to me with these 5 pillars that Junior Bridgman, who was the third largest franchisee at the time, toward him back in 2013 or 14. And these 5 pillars are, exceptional food or guest experiences, simplicity of systems, number 2. Number 3, strong labor and inventory control. Number 4 is powerful operational systems and marketing systems. And number 5 is positive unit economics for continuous growth. So all 5 of those pillars are what kind of make up vetted brands.
Mhm.
And those 5 pillars kind of lead our decision making process on whether a franchise system is able to make it, or is able to offer something that's differentiated from the marketplace.
Mhm.
So, without continuous unit economics and positive unit economics, you're never going to be able to grow or get the validation from franchisees that you're going to need in order to, sell more franchises and get those franchises operating and profitable, because that's what's really key.
Mhm.
Simplicity of systems is so key, no matter what industry you're in, because if a monkey can do it, then anybody can do it. And so having something so simple that you can have anyone perform the task is really key. So those are
Mhm.
kind of the 5 pillars that we really look at when we evaluate a franchise company, and see if they're ready to expand with us.
Hmm. No, I think you're hitting some of the keywords in franchising on the head with systems and processes. That's really what franchising seems to really be all about, in my opinion. And the first thing that you mentioned that I'm curious about as we're talking about quick service restaurants, there's a lot of competition in the restaurant industry, the food industry. You talk about that first pillar being exceptional food and guest experience. How, this is one of those things that's like a little bit subjective, where it's like this tastes good, it doesn't taste good. How do you go about like testing things but putting the data behind it so that you can replicate this and build your own systems with vetted brands, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, exactly. Food and guest experiences is one of the most important. All 5 are really important, but having an exceptional food and guest experience is really important. one thing we see is kiosks, and in the kiosk
Mm,
space with restaurants, and this is kiosks in restaurants that are sit-down restaurants or QSR or fast casual. A
mm,
lot of the brands that we've talked to are like, well, we don't see a need for kiosks because we like to interact with our customers at the counter and ensure that they have everything that they need. Well, we say listen to your customers,
mm,
and we listen to our customers by putting a kiosk into a test location, seeing what it does. And in most cases, in the case of BurgerFi, who we have on our website as a case study, BurgerFi, when they put in a kiosk, 18% tip average increase and 15% increase in the average order. So
mm.
not only are they ordering more, they're actually tipping more. So now that customer is getting served properly, getting served at a rate where the employees are actually able to focus on the customer themselves instead
Mm.
of just ordering or helping the customer order. So having those kiosks are something that's innovation uh, enabling for the restaurant.
That's really fascinating, Mitchell. How do you go about like even testing something like that in the market? Is it like literally opening up one location, starting to test it, or is there something you can do before even putting that location as a kiosk and testing it? What does like the background look like to do something like that?
Yeah, no, and that's something I learned with my internship actually from
Okay.
David Wired. So, with the point of sale systems, not only did I learn how to, look at an opportunity from a supplier and actually vet a POS system, but we actually did test locations. So, we started with their first location uh, in downtown West Palm Beach.
Hmm.
And, this location was the very first location that they had opened. So, looking at a test location and being able to look at kind of the market, the demographics, and seeing if that test location will be able to paint the picture to the rest of the system is also important. And that's kind of what I've learned from that internship.
Hmm. That's really interesting. And one like kind of side note, but as you talk about like tipping in the kiosk, I'm curious as really like the last year, I want to say when you go into like a quick service restaurant, they have like this automatic tipping thing where like the tips like ingrained when you pay where you're tipping like 25% automatically when there's not really a whole lot of service. You're ordering the food yourself, you're getting the food yourself. Is that like something you're seeing in the quick service restaurant? And is that something as you talk about listening to customer feedback where you're starting to see customers kind of turn around and kind of be a little bit negative about some of those things happening?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's always going to be a customer that doesn't like that. But if they don't like the 20% tip, usually, they just hit no tip and that solves the problem. But from what I've seen, with all the kiosks and all the POS systems that I've seen out there, it always doesn't have, the percentage ingrained yet. It's just you have to tap which one you want. And so
Hmm.
that's how I've seen it in the past, and that's the ones we use for our restaurants.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I just asked because I know a lot of companies are moving to this thing where you like force 25% and it makes me want to tip nothing. But when they ask for no tip, it makes me want to tip like 35%. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking about as the kiosk, you're not asking for a huge tip, but you're making it so convenient for the customer that they want to tip a little bit extra. So I think that's just an interesting dynamic that I'm seeing and kind of diving into vetted brands, quick service restaurants. I want to just read something that I was looking at. I think this is from the IFA and Fran data. Over the last 3 decades, consumer spending at QSRs has outpaced what shoppers are spending at traditional grocery stores. This is also the case when comparing spending at QSRs to full service restaurants. So when we're talking about demand, we're really seeing the highest demand for QSR and home service in terms of like the most rapid growth opportunities. What was like the decision making process to go with QSRs versus a home service business? As especially during 2020, we've seen a huge shift to home service business. What gave you the confidence to stick with QSR restaurants, and what do you like so much about that niche?
Yeah, I mean, quick service restaurants and food in general, I think is something that is definitely a need
Mm,
for the people today. Being able to give customers the experience that they want,
mm,
whether it's an online experience through mobile ordering or it's an in-person in-restaurant experience at the dining area. I think that's the really the most important thing, being able to see that customer's face and their reaction when they bite into that hamburger, they bite into that piece of chicken, being able to see that expression and see the joy that comes from having a meal with their family is
mm,
so important and is so key in the franchise QSR space today. We see with innovation during COVID an upsurge in actual delivery and all these platforms like Grubhub, DoorDash, etc. And we still have some restaurants that we come in contact with that haven't taken advantage of those opportunities. Being
mm,
able to give your consumer what they want when they want it is extremely key. Not everybody wants to go inside the restaurant and eat their meal. Some people want their meal delivered, or some people want
mm,
to pick up out front. So giving the customer the opportunity and the option to do those things is what's key. And if
mm,
your brand isn't adapting to what the customer's wanting, then your brand is probably going to die. And
mm.
so we see that in the restaurant space right now, and we see an opportunity for disruption. And that's the reason why, we really want to focus on QSR fast casual brands.
Hmm. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think listening to customer client feedback is always a top priority. You can continually try to make changes, ask your corporate team what you need to be doing differently, but the customer, the client, they're going to be that best source of intel. So I think that's very interesting. In terms of with vetted brands, the businesses that you're working with, is there like a typical stage in the growth period where you tend to take them in, you start to tell them this is where you should start to evaluate franchising, or is every business, one could be just getting started, one could be at the 10-year mark, or is there any like kind of balance there in terms of businesses that you tend to work with in terms of their growth stage?
Yeah, no, exactly. It really varies.
Yeah.
It varies from what the founder wants, what the founder is looking to accomplish, to what
Mm,
is the brand going to be able to accomplish, and what is the brand going to be able to grow? How is it going to be able to grow? Does every city need that specific restaurant or QSR? Does it fit in every city? Some brands don't. Some brands' culture isn't going to fit in, the middle of Idaho or,
mm,
Denver, Colorado. And comparatively, maybe a brand is going to be able to fit in every location in the United States, but the founder quite isn't there yet. So being able to evaluate all of those intricacies and being able to, give the founder and give the brand, the best opportunity for growth and success is really how we like to take a look at that and really scale and help them scale.
Okay, that's awesome. I know we're talking about like growth, scaling. You're talking about kind of like those five pillars. We touched upon the food and guest experience, which is definitely very, very important. If you don't have a good experience, you're probably not ever going to come back. In terms of the simplicity of systems, this is kind of like a word that's thrown out a lot in franchising. The systems. You're not in franchising though, and it might get annoying. You just hear systems. How do you know like if a system is actually meant to be replicated? I'm sure as a business owner, you've done it before. You're gonna think it's simple no matter what, and you can scale it. But how do you actually tell that your model is simple and can actually be replicated, as you mentioned, so that a monkey can replicate it?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's having, action lists, especially in the QSR space, the fast casual space, having action lists, checklists, opening and closing procedures, having all of these key ingredients to a successful restaurant, successful operating restaurant, ensuring that, you hit all of those key pillars, having, strong operational systems so that your franchisees can be profitable. Everything leads back to profitability. So if you can have those checklists, opening, closing procedures that help you operate your restaurant in a better way, it's going to lead to more profitability, which leads to validation, which leads to growth. So that's the only way we see how a franchise system can grow, is through validation and through profitability for the franchisee at the unit economic level.
Yeah. No, I think that's really powerful. And for the viewers, if you're not sure like what validation is, definitely go back, watch a couple of the podcasts where we talk about it a lot. But validation, when you're a franchise looking to grow, part of the franchise discovery process, if you're evaluating business opportunities, is actually speaking to other franchise owners in the system. And really the key about this process is that it's not just, their top three franchise owners that are absolutely crushing it out of the park that they want you to speak to. It's the top performers, the middle performers, the bottom performers. You can really see why they got to where they got and seeing if it aligns with your goals for the future. And if a franchise wants to grow, they have to put candidates through this process of speaking to other franchise owners. Those other franchise owners are not making money, but also happy with their day in the life, they're not going to validate strongly, and a franchise is not going to be able to grow. So when it talked about responsible growth, responsible franchising, it really just comes down to making your franchisees happy, because there's no other way to grow responsibly without having happy franchise owners. So I think those are some awesome points, Mitchell. And when it comes down to the brands you're dealing with, we talked about these 5 pillars. I'm sure you probably turned down a lot of brands a lot as well that maybe aren't ready for that next stage of franchising, that next stage of growth, but they still have some things to figure out. And then maybe down the road, they can start to look at it. Is there one of those pillars that you see that most of the businesses that are missing from businesses that aren't ready to take that next step?
Yeah, I mean, really, with some of the brands that we've talked to in the past, strong labor and inventory control. Not having a sense of their labor model or having their sense of inventory control. Do they have the scalability to be able to distribute to all 50 states? Do they have the labor model that makes sense and is profitable? So when you're looking at inventory control and labor control, we want to see it, under 30% for each. So their food costs 30% and their labor 30%. Some of the brands we work with right now, they have, lower than 30% food costs and labor costs. And that's really what we want to identify. But if they're above 30%, it just doesn't make sense, and doesn't make sense from a profitability standpoint for the franchisee. So, those are really key in finding out whether a system is really to grow at this time. The other stuff like the powerful operational systems and marketing support, you can add that in on the back end just with the support you provide your franchisees. But if you don't have the labor model, and if you don't have the food model or the food economic model, then it's just not going to make sense from a unit economic standpoint.
Yeah, I think those are some really great points. And I know when I'm talking to candidates kind of that are evaluating the food industry, the quick service restaurants, they can be one of those where it's very sexy on the outside. They can do really well, but helping candidates understand in those economies, it's easy to make money in a great economy, but when the economy goes down, looking at those things like labor and inventory control and making sure those numbers, are not out of hand. It's not like 30, 40, 50 employees where it's very tough in those lower economies. So can you talk to me a little bit about like the actual stores and the businesses you work with? Is there like a number of employees that's ideal? And then when you talk about like the square footage of the store, is that something that's pretty replicated among all the businesses that you work with in terms of what you're advising them? Or can like a chicken, a pizza business be a little bit different in terms of the square footage, or in terms of being a successful QSR? Is there kind of like one thing where size, labors, it should all kind of be somewhat symmetric?
It's really, specific to the industry, specific to the actual business, and kind of what they're looking to achieve. But what we're seeing that's really hot right now is, these 1,000 square foot locations that are quick service restaurants that, maybe have 1 or 2 kiosks up front, usually nobody working the front desk. And then we have, 1 or 2 individuals, 2 or 3 at the peak time during peak hours running the actual kitchen and delivering the orders to the customers. And that's kind of, what we see is that 1,000 square foot model. Some of the brands we work with have an actual dining room where they have 10 or 15 tables, and the customer orders at the counter, either with a kiosk or without a kiosk, with an individual at the counter, and then goes and sits down. And so those require, anything from 1,800 to 2,200 square foot, space. But really, what we like to see is that the 1,000 square foot, there's one pizza brand that we're working with in New York City and Washington, D.C., where, in New York City, they have 650 square feet, and they're doing outrageous numbers out of that 650 square foot location. And they have other locations in DC as well, where same idea, under 800, 900 square feet, and they're able to operate, a great business out of that.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. And it's interesting to see kind of the different models, and especially somewhere in like New York City, a very competitive market. I was going to ask, when you have these businesses that have a certain location, are you typically advising that they continue their growth in kind of the local market, continue to expand throughout the state, and then hit like the next state over? Or can they like skip states, or can they go across the country? How does that like growth work? Can you go all in at once? Should it be slow, periodic growth?
Yep. So that's a great question. That's something that a lot of restaurants, QSRs, fast casuals, any brand in franchising actually sometimes misses. And it's clustering your restaurants, clustering your locations. By doing this in the food space, you're able to decrease your food costs. You're also able to operationally support your franchisees better, because you're actually supporting a region instead of trying to support, the whole entire southeast of the United States. If you were in New York City and you wanted to open up a restaurant in California, supporting that one California franchisee would be incrementally more expensive to support that franchisee than supporting a franchisee in, New Jersey or Connecticut if you're in New York City. So being able to cluster your restaurants properly is something that we advise our clients to do, and actually help them cluster properly so that it makes sense for them.
What about so like every brand like wants to be in the hot markets, like Texas, Florida, all these places where you see heavy people moving into a very strong support of business ownership and capitalism. If you have a business that maybe they're in the Midwest, maybe they're in Canada, for example, but they see these hot markets and they just want to be there. How do you like go about like trying to be in the hot markets, but as you alluded to, you don't want to be everywhere at once because it incrementally, adds up to your expenses. How do you kind of balance wanting to be almost like a FOMO? You feel like you're missing out on some of these markets, but you also want to grow responsibly and periodically.
Yeah, I'm not going to say you can't go to, Texas, but it's got to make sense, and it's got to make, a lot of sense. It's got to make sense in the sense that both you and the franchisee are going to have the experience, the capital, the human capital, and the financial capital to be able to make it work. If you look at a franchisee in Texas who doesn't have really that much experience operating restaurants, doesn't have the financial capital they're going to need to operate that restaurant successfully and get it off the ground in the first 6 to 12 months, then, it's highly advisable that you don't sell them that franchise. But if they have, a tremendous expertise in the restaurant space, they've operated multi-unit, multi-brand operator, and they have the capital to help grow, then maybe that does look like something you can work out if you as the franchise system have the operational support and the training programs and the operation brand standard manuals in place to actually help that franchisee be successful. So it's kind of got to be both scenarios where you marry them together. That's really the only case it's going to be able to work.
Okay, that's really interesting, Mitchell. I think we're covering a lot of ground on today's episode, and I know the hour's starting to wind down. So I do want to give you some time to talk about band, because I think that's very interesting, especially, I said earlier, and I'll say every single time, I say every day, the difference between an independent business having success and then even just a few franchise units having success is really day and night. Like besides like the product or service that you're selling in an independent and a franchise model, that's really all that's the same. Like hiring, ROI, scalability, infrastructure, national resources, everything's so different when you're in a franchise model. So when you're talking to someone that did it independently and you're talking to franchise people that did the same thing, you're going to hear night and day perspectives, because when you're in a franchise model, you get to skip the first 5 steps of starting your own business, which is really the hardest part. And you get to focus on actually scaling that business and then having a support team by your side where you're not trying to figure out everything on your own. You can take your current skill set, have the mindset, and leverage that to be open and start to learn things. And then you can take control of your future through business ownership. So Mitchell, can you tell us a little bit about how did Band get started? You kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, you were looking at POS systems, you're starting to see all these different things. How was Band ultimately created, and why did you see such a need for it?
Yeah, so the founder of Band, Ilya Pappas, actually one of the co-founders of Blue Apron, started Band after he left Blue Apron. He started Band a couple years ago, two years ago exactly, I think. And traditionally, it was just meant for buying groups or group purchasing organizations, and it was meant to run the operating system or the background information for those group purchasing groups or those GPOs. And really what I saw the opportunity in franchising is, all these franchise systems do exactly what a GPO does, which is band together and buy off contracts for their franchisees. So negotiating contracts with suppliers and helping their franchisees get the best rates based on the group volume, while at the same time collecting a rebate from that supplier, because that supplier doesn't have to use marketing dollars to find customers. They have all their customers from that one contract with the franchisor. That's why the suppliers are willing to give a rebate and actually offer even lower rates for their supplies to their franchisees, because all their customers are in one spot. So having the ability to track all of that information, having an operating system to help a franchise system run a group purchasing platform is really what I think Band is really special, in the sense that it helps a franchise system track their rebate. It helps a franchise system identify any opportunities that they can save their franchisees more money with their expense savings tool, as well as being able to share those rebates back with franchisees, and encouraging engagement throughout the procurement process, which is key in franchising.
That's awesome, Mitchell. I don't know how like specific you could get, but is there like a case study or something when someone is thinking about doing this myself or investing into a franchise, they're like, I'm making this big investment, they should do everything for me. But you're really getting a ton with that investment, and it's really an opportunity to see what you make of that opportunity. But can you talk about, when you're making this investment into a franchise, how much money are you actually saving through some of these national relationships, resources? What does that kind of look for, like that typical business that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, so from the franchisee perspective or prospective franchisee, I would say, ask your franchisor, what does that look like? How much will I be saving on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis? And they should have the answers to that. And if they don't, then, that's a concern, because you want to, as a franchisee, be able to say, hey, if I'm going into this franchise system, I'm going to be paying 5-6% royalty fee. What am I getting for that? And the answer should be exceptional operational systems and marketing support, but also strong inventory control, in the sense that you as a franchisee are going to be saving 2%, 3% off your supplies that you're buying as a business. And because you're in a bigger group of franchisees, because you're in a franchise system, you're actually saving 3% a year off your top line from buying with the contracts. So that's kind of what I would recommend is, as a franchisee, asking your franchisor, hey, what does this look like if I join your group and if I join your system, become a franchisee, what am I going to be saving on a yearly basis based on your contracts?
No, that's awesome, Mitchell, because that's literally what I think is really the key to successful franchising or successful relationships, successful anything is really managing expectations and making this big investment and understanding what exactly is that money going to, whether it's the royalties, the marketing, that initial franchise fee, because every brand, every system, every industry is going to do things a little bit differently, as you alluded to. The key is knowing what you're getting with that franchise and then understanding through validation, what will your life look like in that 3, 6, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year time frame? And you can start to figure out, does this align with your goals for the future? And I still have so many questions, and I know our time's winding up. One thing I think would be interesting to just kind of end on is you've been in franchising, you've got a franchising degree, you went to the Titus Center, you've been around industry veterans. Franchising industry, you kind of alluded to earlier, it was different 5 years ago compared to where it is today, and probably somewhere very different in another 5 years. What have you kind of seen has been like the changes over the years since you started at Palm Beach Atlantic to where we are today?
Yeah, and in the franchise community, I think the big change, everybody's talking about responsible franchising, that existed, before 5 years ago. There's
Yeah.
been companies that have, of course, franchised responsibly, uh, for dozens of centuries. But what I see the big key change in is just that. Uh, you see a lot of businesses that are looking for growth, like 700 businesses, I believe, last year. Here's a statistic that I read. 700 businesses last year franchised, but we don't need 700 new franchised businesses, because I think, out of those 700, probably 90% are not going to be franchising next year. So I think being able to identify what what key franchise system is going to be successful and is going to be uh, able to scale and grow because they have the right human capital and financial capital is going to be key in the next 2 to 3 years, next 5 to 10 years.
Hmm.
Uh, because like I tell Steve all the time, we don't need another XYZ hamburger company that's, just flipping patties. We need something that's, more in depth and has more of an exceptional food and guest experience for the customer.
Hmm. Yeah, I think those are all really great points. And I think we were kind of talking about that a couple of weeks ago, just when franchising, what we're kind of seeing is historically you make this investment into a franchise and you're getting the brand recognition and you're not really sure what else you're getting with that. Each brand, as we alluded to, is a little bit differently. But what I feel like we're starting to see now, especially some of the newer emerging brands, is that with that investment, they're providing a lot more support in terms of the marketing, the lead generation, helping you maybe put a general manager in place that's also incentivized to grow the business. And I also like the point about responsible franchising. I think with social media, it's been thrown everywhere, but franchising wouldn't exist today if it hasn't been responsible for the most part over the last couple decades. And I think the numbers about 80% of franchisees are still a franchisee after 5 years. So if 80% of people are still in the system, still producing cash flow, still happy, majority of franchise are doing it responsibly. But just like any industry, whether it's financial planners, athletes, whatever, teachers, whatever, colleges, there's good and bad apples of everything. So like we said, the goal is to manage expectations in a successful relationship so that you know what you're getting. And really that's what we're here to do, just help educate people on the opportunity in franchising. I know our hours wind down, Mitchell. So do you have any final thoughts? I know I have a bunch of other questions that we won't get to, but this was awesome, Mitchell. I learned a lot today. I have a bunch of notes. Do you have any final takeaways, notes for the viewers today?
No, this was great. I really enjoyed the time here, and look forward to seeing everything else that you're able to accomplish with JDS Strategic, and look forward to helping you or anyone you know in any way.
Awesome, Mitchell. So just quick wrap up for me. You're welcome to leave if you have a 10 o'clock meeting. But for me, I just like to quickly wrap up the podcast. Some of my big takeaways of the episode. This is so much fun, Mitchell. One, just your curiosity that we spoke about earlier. I just noticed from like the most successful people, they just have this real curiosity about how the world works that ultimately leads to their success. They're not trying to figure out how can I make money? How can I do this? But it really comes with the passion and trying to solve different problems. And then really just taking advantage of opportunities is another theme that I notice of successful people. You had a lot of opportunities and you took advantage of every opportunity and saw the opportunity through. You weren't just, walking by, really like I did in college, just not making the most of those opportunities. So I think that's really important for someone that's going into college, or maybe your 40s, 50s, 60s. A lot of success is based upon the people the relationships, the information that I'm a big fan.
Oh, sorry, John. I'm wrapping up another meeting.
No, go for it. I'll talk to the viewers by myself.
Later.
This is awesome, Mitchell. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Awesome. So this was a lot of fun today. Basically, for me, whether you're 40s, 50s, 60s, I think everyone wants to be successful. It's just a lack of resources and information. So the more hands you shake, the more people really the more success you can have. So I think it's really important. Just have that open mindset, build connections, build opportunities, and don't be afraid to say yes. Don't be afraid to say no sometimes, but take advantage of those opportunities and see where it takes you. And also when he talks about being persistent, especially when you're early stages as a business owner, there's going to be a lot of gray days until you start to stack those wins. Once you get a couple wins, you can start to feel the law of compounding. But the first months, the first year, that's where you're trying to ramp up the business. And if it were easy, every single person would be trying to do it. So I think it's just really important. Just if you have the mindset, you're going to be able to leverage a franchise that's also going to be there supporting you, aligned to watch you succeed. So I think that's really important. And then finally, every brand is just so different. Whether it's an industry, a brand, we talk about painting, we talk about quick service restaurants, flooring, office-based businesses. Every business, every franchise is going to be a little bit different. So our goal at JD Strategic is really to help manage this process, help educate you throughout each stage of the process so that if you're making this big investment, your lifestyle, your financials, everything's going to potentially change over the next couple of years. So we want you, to the best of your ability, to know what your life looks like. And at the end, decide, is franchising, is business ownership the path for you? So thank you everyone so much for tuning into this episode with Mitchell Nolan. I had a great time. I hope you guys found some value today.